I was a younger man back then, full of strength, my hands rough from years of working as a logger. I spent my days hauling pulpwood, cutting through trees like they were nothing but grass. Back in those days, hard work was honest work, the kind of labor that made a man who he was. But it was the evenings that meant the most, when the day's toil was done, and I could sit with my guitar, strumming away the aches in my fingers. Sometimes even my wife and children would sit and listen for a spell. Music was my true soul's work, but there was one night, one damn night that changed everything. I was working late, the last one out in the woods, the sun bleeding out behind the trees. The air was thick, the scent of pine and damp earth curling around me. That's when I heard it, a voice, low and rich, carrying through the trees. Not like a bird or some lost hunter calling out. No, this was a man's voice, and it was singing. The melody was strange, something old, something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. And the words? Well, they didn't quite make sense. Like they came from a time before language got all polished and neat. But the way that song hummed in the air, it felt hungry, like it was searching for something. Curiosity got the better of me, so I followed the sound deeper into the woods, past the old mill road, past the place where the trees grew too thick. And there he was, an old man. He had black skin the color of bark. His hair was bushy, long, and gray as Spanish moss. He sat on a fallen log, his fingers moving over the strings of a battered old guitar. His voice was thick with a weight I couldn't place. "That's a mighty fine tune," I said, stepping closer. "Never heard nothing like that before." The man looked up, his eyes dark and deep as the river. "Ain't many have," he said. "Ain't many supposed to." I asked him about the song, about the way it made my bones feel cold, even in the thick Mississippi heat. He studied me a long while, then nodded like he'd made up his mind about something. "I'll teach it to you, boy, but you best listen well. This song ain't for just any man's hands." And so he taught me. I sat there in the woods, his guitar in my lap, and I learned that song. It wasn't hard, and the chords came easy. The words stuck in my mind like they'd been waiting there all along. But when I played it, Lord have mercy, the woods changed. The wind died down, even the bugs stopped humming. And the trees? I swear on my life, it seems like they listened. "You stop right there," the old man warned, his voice sharp as a knife. "You don't want to finish that song, not unless you want to wake them up." He said. "Wake up who?" I asked. He didn't answer, just shook his head, took his guitar, and walked off into the trees like he'd never been there at all. I should have left it alone, but I didn't. As I ate dinner that night and laid down to sleep, that song was still heavy on my mind. I couldn't figure out why that old man didn't want me to finish it. A few nights later, sitting on my porch, the song came back to me. For some reason, I couldn't let it rest. My fingers moved on their own, picking out the melody, my voice humming low in my throat, and then I sang it. The night went still, the air turned heavy, and that's when I felt them. They weren't just a feeling, I could see them. Shadows stretched along the yard, thick and shifting like smoke. Faint figures flickered just beyond the glow of the porch light, their outlines hazy but unmistakable. Shapes of men, children, and women, some tall, some bent with age, their eyes hollow pits of darkness, and the whispering, "Lawrence," my name spoken like a breath of wind, curling around my ears, the voices overlapping, too many to count. Some spoke in tongues I didn't recognize. Others murmured names, memories, things I shouldn't have been able to hear. And then, Lawrence. It was a voice I knew, a voice I had loved. I turned my head, my breath catching in my throat. Standing just at the edge of the steps was my brother Oscar. He had died when we were boys, drowned in the pond one summer afternoon while I had my back turned. I hadn't seen him in over 30 years, but there he was, his face just as I remembered it, his eyes locked onto mine. "Oscar?" My voice barely made a sound. He took a step forward, his bare feet silent on the porch boards. The other figures moved closer too, their whispers louder, urgent, and desperate. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't come back to my senses. Maybe they would have taken me with them. Maybe I would have wanted to go. But my instinct took over. I snatched my guitar and slammed my hands down across the strings, the dissonant twang breaking the spell. The figures stepped back, Oscar along with them, and the whispering turned into wails. And in that instant, they were gone. The night was quiet again, like nothing ever happened. I don't know how long I sat there, my breath caught in my chest, too scared to move. But when I did, I took that guitar, that cursed thing, and I buried it deep in the old shed behind my house, covering it with old tarps and rusted tools. I asked around about that old man and even looked for him once. But it was like he never existed. I told myself I'd never play that song again, and I didn't. Not once in all these years. But now, lying in this hospice bed, my body worn and tired, I know the past don't stay buried forever. My great-grandson, Brian, is as curious as I was at his age. He found that old guitar in my shed, underneath the tarp and old rusted tools, and he also found the yellowed piece of paper tucked under the strings, the song still scrawled in my own damn handwriting. And now I hear him strumming it. Just the first few notes, plucked soft and slow, but the air in this room has changed. The night feels thick and heavy, just like it did all those years ago. And in the farthest corner of the room, where the shadows are longest, I see him again, Oscar, standing there stoic in the shadows, watching, waiting, and then I understand. My breath slows, my body feels light. The weight of years, of aches, of mistakes, of sorrow, it all drifts away. The guitar is still strumming as Brian sings the words, but I no longer hear it in this world. No, I hear it from the other side. Oscar smiles as he reaches out his hand, and as the last note fades, so do I.